this new ÇEMMA webinar on Social Security contributions. What's important to know? We're waiting for the participants to join. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and later on uploaded to the ÇEMMA website. With me today, we have Pamela Potch, who is the Assistant Principal in charge of Pensions and Benefits Department, Josman Delmar, Assistant Principal from the Collection Sections, the Office of the Commissioner for Revenue, and Matilda Pilson, who is a TV presenter, ex-teacher, a well-known personality who will be sharing with us her experience and her views on this subject. With me, we have Jasmine Darmani in the background, who will be looking at your comments, which I invite you to do through the chat function, as well as any questions which I invite you to do in the Q&A, so that we will be able to possibly answer them. Questions should be of a general nature. If they are very specific to your particular circumstances, obviously we can direct you, Jasmine will be able to direct you to the right channels from where you can get the information. So, starting off, Pamela,
yes,
will be giving us a short overview of the Social Security system. After that, we will be entertaining questions, as I said, but also engaging the panel in the discussion. From Josman's perspective, obviously, he will be giving us his views, the involvement of the Commissioner for Revenue with respect to Social Security contributions, that perspective, and of course Matilda will be, so to speak, the client of the Social Security system, the perspectives, perhaps benefits and difficulties that have been tackled. Pamela, would you like to start with your overview?
Yes, sure. So, as Maya said, I'm Pamela, and I'm going to discuss with you insurability. Okay. So, Social Security contributions are practically mandatory payments from individuals who earn an income, which is paid to the government. When I say individuals, I mean those aged 16 and over up to 65 years of age. Employees get their Social Security contributions deducted at source by their employer, whereas self-employed pay their contributions at the Inland Revenue Department directly. Insurability, however, and as the slide displays, goes a little bit beyond this, and it includes part-timers, exemptions, those who work abroad, those who take up early retirement schemes, also known as voluntary retirement schemes, and also credits. I refer to credits as contributions paid by the government, but I will go in depth about them at a later stage. So, the Social Security contribution has traditionally been referred to as Imbolla in Maltese. There's a small image on the right-hand side, in fact. Bolla refers to the stamp that used to be manually affixed to a person's notebook, showing the number of contributions a person would have paid. A Social Security contribution is also referred in our day-to-day language as SSC or NI, in abbreviated terms, okay? Employees who are employed and work less than 8 hours in a week are not considered as being in insurable employment for Social Security contribution purposes and are exempted from paying a Social Security contribution. Each year of gainful occupation will carry 52 or 53 Social Security contributions depending on the annual number of Mondays. So there are two types of Social Security contributions, namely Class 1 Social Security contributions and Class 2 Social Security contributions. Social Security contributions are paid by individuals who are employed and self-employed, but those who are employed pay Class 1 contributions, whereas those who are self-employed or self-occupied pay Class 2 Social Security contributions, and rates apply. They can be viewed on the IRD website as well. To make the notes, the presentation much more concrete, practical, and comprehensive, I have included an example. Hence, there is an online Social Security calculator, which I myself make use of, and details about this calculator will be given later on. First and foremost, I wish to highlight that overtime, allowances, bonuses, okay, have no effect on the Social Security contribution rate. As you can see, since the basic pay cover a period of 4 weeks, there it reads 1,632. You need to sum it up to have a yearly annual salary. It shows in the third table 21,225, and then you divided it in by 52 weeks, which comes to 408. And the weekly contribution at 10% is 40.81. So table in the middle basically shows that if you earn a weekly wage between 179 and 480 euro, you pay 10% of your weekly basic wage.
Pamela, if I may interject at this moment, at this point in time, the second table has 2 rows, C and D.
C and D, exactly.
What are the differences there?
So it's first and foremost, it's for persons born from the 1st of January 1962 onwards. Okay. There's category C and category D for those whose earnings is equal to 480 up to 480. They pay 10%.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And the rest,
so it's like the maximum, right? The maximum that you pay is 48.05. Okay.
Yes, now exactly. The maximum that you would pay is 48.05. And it's applicable to those people who earn more than 480 a week. Okay. Yes. So, part-time employees. So part-time employees have the option to pay 10% of their basic weekly wage. However, anyone who works less than 40 hours per week and who earns less than the national minimum wage, which is 179 weekly or €4.48 an hour, has the option to pay their share of Social Security contributions on a pro rata basis, 10%. Good to note, however, that when paying Social Security contributions by 10% pro rata, these contributions are different from the full contributions paid at the applicable fully weekly rate, and eventually will not be considered as one contribution per week. Let's say I'm a full-time employee, so at the end per year I will get 52 contributions paid. I work less than 40 hours. I paid the 10% pro rata, and practically at the end of year, I pay 34 contributions during that year. So it makes a difference, okay? Social Security contributions are recorded. They are recorded and they are shown on the employee's contribution record sheet, okay? You might ask, what is the sheet on my right? But it is very, very easy to understand. You can ignore for now the type ST. So, it's divided into 3 main columns. The first column shows the year when the contributions were made. The second column, the number of contributions paid and by class 1, class 2, and class 3. I will explain. And the third column illustrates the credits by class. Class 1 for employees, Class 2 for self-employed and self-occupied, and Class 3 voluntary, or those who pay by retrospective, which I'm going to explain later on. One more thing, DST basically is referred to those, it's marked for those who pay Class 1 contributions. Those who pay Class 2, namely the self-employed and self-occupied, they pay according to category. So that's basically it. Instead of having ST next to the contributions paid, they will have, let's say, SA, SB, or SC. So I have provided another simple example to help you understand why contributions are important. Any deficiency will affect the contribution average, okay? For example, to be eligible to a full 2/3 pension, the contribution average must be at least 50. So this is why contributions are important and needs to be paid. Any contribution average from 15 to 49.99 will result in a decreased amount of 2/3 pension rate. So this is practically an example of why we need to pay them and the negative effect it will have on a number of benefits. So, retrospective payments, what are they? If you are employed or self-occupied and you have gaps in your contribution record sheet, you have the option to pay Social Security contributions. Obviously, conditions apply. You need to be 59 years of age, and scheme is applicable to those who have not yet attained 65 years of age. There is also a maximum number of contributions you can pay, I mean, up to 5 years. And contributions may only be paid for periods of residence in Malta. The applicable rate due is €30.77 per contribution per week. So, who is exempted from the payment of contributions? Employees who carry out less than 8 hours of work in any one calendar week are not considered as being in insurable employment for Social Security contribution purposes. But if their annual earnings exceed 910, so you work less than 8 hours a week, but your annual earnings are more than 910, you are personally responsible to pay a self-occupied contribution. If the annual earnings do not exceed 910, you are exempted from the payment of such contributions. Employment abroad. There are Maltese who are employed abroad in a non-EU country, an EU country, in an EU institution, WHO, or in UN institutions. When they maintain an ordinary residence in Malta, they have the option to pay a Class 1 contribution. Payment is carried out in the same manner as that applicable to self-employed occupied persons on the form shown. So, even though they're working abroad, they can pay contributions here in Malta. Early voluntary retirement schemes. Persons who retire from employment through an early voluntary retirement scheme have the option to continue paying a Class 2 contribution as self-employed persons. Practically, they have two options. So, you choose to retire, to benefit from an early voluntary retirement scheme. And then you may go for either you choose to pay Social Security contributions up to retirement age. A copy of this scheme would be required together with a request to pay such contributions. It's important that request should include that registering for employment with ETC, now it's now Jobs Plus, will not take place. Or else if you're registering for work, you need to pay contributions for the first 6 months. To do this, you need to submit a request to the Department of Social Security. And then after the lapse of 6 months, these contributions are, you will be granted credits. known as Social Security unemployment credits. It's important that, not to leave a gap in the Social Security contribution record sheet. Okay, so it's either you pay until retirement age, or else you pay for the first 6 months. You need to submit documents that you benefited from the early retirement scheme, and then after 6 months, after the lapse of 6 months, you will get Social Security unemployment credits. So credits are credited contributions. I like to refer to credits as contributions paid by the government that protect your Social Security contribution record sheet. You get your contributions covered if you stay at home to take care of a child up to 6 years of age. They're called child credits for child rearing. If the medical board certified you as being incapable of performing full-time or part-time employment, actually any employment due to health reasons. So there you get invalidity credits. If you are a widow for a period during which you do not remarry, and provided that your deceased husband had paid 156 contributions. So there you get your widow's credits. If you are an ex-member of the Malta Police Force or of the Armed Forces of Malta, you get your service credits. If you are in receipt of sickness benefit, you get your sickness credits. If you are self-occupied and in receipt of an injury benefit, again, you get your injury benefit, your injury credits. You are entitled to credits if you lose your job through redundancy, okay, and registering for work. No, you are also entitled for study credits if you've continued pursuing your studies. There are voluntary credits for those performing voluntary work in Malta or abroad. And if you are in receipt of a carer's pension. So, Social Security contributions, and I highlight this, they are not only for retirement purposes. Unfortunately, they are associated with retirement, but they also entitle one to a number of benefits under specific circumstances and conditions. Although you, as you know, you might forward your questions to Jasmine Darmanin whilst you are online. There's the JAMA site, which you may visit, subscribe to. There's the Social Security website. You can call 153, and you can send us an email either at jamma@gov.mt or there's another email address, social.security@gov.mt.
Thank you, Pamela.
You're welcome.
That was a very interesting overview and rather comprehensive. And it also brings up quite a few questions. You mentioned at the end, there was that slide with all the benefits that are associated with Social Security contributions. Now, we know that if you don't pay all your the minimum number of Social Security contributions over the years, then you don't get your full pension.
That's
if you're not up to date with your Social Security contributions, how can that affect some of those benefits?
Yes, because to give you an example, a practical one. No, a retirement pension. There are two main computations. Okay, the pensionable income, which involves the salaries, and the contribution average. So if you have gaps in your Social Security record sheet, you refuse to pay by retro when you are 59 years of age, you will have a deficient contribution average, and that will affect the retirement pension negatively.
Yes,
and
but
it doesn't. It's not only about It's not only about retirement pensions, right? It's if you apply for invalidity pension, it may affect you. If you apply for the widow's pension, let's say I'm married and I pass away. a widow's pension is the deceased person becomes the insured person. So if I lack contributions, that will affect my husband's widow's pension. So it affects quite a number of benefits.
So if I am not up to date in terms of my contributions,
yes,
right, and I end up unemployed, that could effectively disqualify me from taking unemployment benefits.
Conditions apply. Yes. So I'm not into unemployment benefit as such. However, yes, they might ask you, for example, to provide the FS3 for the previous year. Maybe you lack contributions, and it may affect it. Yes, I'm not into. I'm sorry, but I'm not into unemployment benefits as such. But it will affect the other benefits, the contributory benefits for sure.
I think, Jusman, we can bring you into the discussion here because obviously, if there are missing contributions, your role, maybe you can explain. You start off by explaining your role, Jusman, as within the office for the of the Commissioner for Revenue and your relationship with social security contributions.
I've been working in collection section maybe I think 10 years now, and our section is responsible for collecting national insurance contributions by the employer, not by the employee. Our job, to give you an example, unfortunately, employers, they give the FS3 to the employee, which is very important. Because there are some cases where the employer does not give an FS3 to the employee. That will be a negative situation for the employee. But unfortunately, payments regarding the national insurance contributions of the employee and FSS tax, obviously also, they are not being paid. So we send notices to the employer to bring themselves up to date regarding documents not submitted or payments not up to date. At the end, if the employer doesn't comply, we take them to court.
So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, Jusman, the employee would be covered if they have an FS3 showing that contributions have been paid.
When the employee arrives at the age of the pension and he has all the FS3s, although the employer did not pay, the employee is still covered. That's why it is very important that the employee has the FS3 in hand.
So it becomes very important for employees to make sure that the documents they are getting year in, year out reflect what they have actually, what has been subtracted in effect to go for social security contributions.
Yes, every month the employer deducts the amount of tax and amount of social security contributions. When the year ends, by the 15th February of the next year, the employer sends two documents, FS7, which is an update of all the FS3s given to the employees, plus the FS3s, and they send it to the department. If there are less than 9 employees, they can send it manual, and more than 9 employees, they have to send it online.
Right.
Then obviously they are worked out, and we will see if there is a difference or not. And our job is also, when we send notices to the employers, they can pay their arrears by an agreement.
I'll come to that, Josma. So let's say I'm an employee.
All right.
And I'm not given an FS3.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked for it, and I'm still not given that FS3. What should I be doing then next? Would it be something maybe for the...
Yesterday I spoke to the head of section of taxpayer service about this situation, and he told me it is the responsibility of the employee to run after the employer for the FS3. If he is not given the FS3, then it is our duty as a collection section to take necessary action against the employer by means of going to the courts to the law courts.
Okay, so there isn't perhaps a link via the Director for Industrial Relations, for Employment and Industrial Relations, that it's not a condition of work.
Years ago, there was something. There was a Revenue Security Corps. Years ago, in the beginning of the 90s, but that ended a long time ago. So now, as I told you, it is the last step is us taking the employer to court, and hopefully, because as I said, the important thing is that the employee has the FS3. It's if he doesn't pay, it's got nothing to do with the employee. It's between us and him. That's why it's important that the employee has the FS3 in hand.
And this is something that I think, one has to drum it into people's minds, that they need to religiously make sure that their contributions are being paid and they have a record for them. Matilda, during your time, you were employed as a teacher originally, I believe. So I wouldn't imagine that your employer missed out on any contributions.
It was the government, so.
So how do you, for me, it is quite interesting to hear how perhaps your perception has changed with respect to the payment of Social Security contributions. What have you seen, by way of improvements, or maybe what you would have liked to see improved in terms of the end user, so to speak, the beneficiary of Social Security contributions, having paid them over your career? What has been your experience in this regard?
Well, when you are young and you look at the payslip every month and you see that there are a number, euros or whatever, deducted from your salary, you don't like it because you are planning your future. You need every euro that you earn. But then at my age now, I can see that those contributions were very important. First of all, to contribute to my pension now, because otherwise I wouldn't have had a pension, or else I would have had it reduced. And there are a number of benefits which either I am gaining from, or else I know close relatives that are benefiting from these social benefits. Like, for example, like having carers at home if you have a bedridden husband and you can't cope on your own. So the government sends carers to the house to help the wife in taking care of her husband. I know that there are also carers who go to these people to give them some respite so that they can carry on with their life. There are other benefits like you can have a hearing test now, free. You can have your eyes and your nose and whatever checked without paying a cent. So there are a number of benefits that through the active aging program, sort of, which all these benefits depend on the contributions paid by us to the government, so that the government can then distribute all these benefits to those who really need them. Now, through my working life, well, I retired when I was 60, because that was the retirement age at that time. But between 60 and 65, and even up to now, I work as a part-time self-employed. So I would like to ask Pamela, please, when I got to 60 and I worked as a part-timer as well, I had to pay social security contributions. That was the law at the time. But what I find as an anomaly or an injustice, call it what you like, is that these contributions that you pay from the retirement age to 65, they don't add on to your pension. I mean, if my pension was so many euros per month and I worked for a number of years until 65, the pension that I got at 60 remained the same later on. So I would like you to refer to this, please.
Pamela, you need to unmute your...
Okay, sorry. So yes, as things stand, you need to pay contributions up to 65 years of age and tax even beyond. Unfortunately, yes, it won't affect your pension. It will affect those who retired, continued in insurable employment, continued to pay contributions, and request a revision at 65 years of age. Those, yes, but they would need to have a deficient contribution average, in that we use the contributions paid between 61 years of age, 62 years of age, and 65. Those, yes. But unfortunately, yes, if you have a full contribution average, you've retired, you need to pay contributions up to 65 years of age, but practically they won't be used. I agree with Matilda.
Don't you consider this as an injustice? I mean, you are paying these contributions and you are not getting anything in a way in return.
I would add on. I would increase pension rate. I would use them to increase pension rate, but unfortunately, as things stand, no.
They're not used. So
exactly.
maybe someday this will happen.
So under which conditions exactly are you able to continue working and then your pension is increased?
So there are two. There are two, let's call them options, okay? So if you retire as per pensions reform, and let's say 63 years of age, and you continue in insurable employment up to 65 years of age, and your contribution average was, when your pension is assessed, was deficient, okay? Let's say by deficient.
So it needs to be deficient.
Yes. For example, 49 over 50, okay, not 50 over 50 full. We ask for FS3s, as Jasmine said, okay, and we use those contributions to fill in the gaps in the Social Security record sheet, and the contribution average is amended as such. It will increase, and hence it will increase your pension rate. So that's one thing. So if the contribution average is deficient at 65 years of age, we revise the pension rate according to contributions paid after pension age. That's one thing. Then there is the percentage increase. So let's say I had I could benefit from the early opt-out at 61 years of age, but I refused to apply for a pension and delayed my retirement date. Let's say I applied for a pension at 62 years of age. I get a percentage increase, which is a 5% increase per week.
So if by your pensionable age, you would have full contributions and you're entitled to the full 2/3 pension,
just like
you decide to forego, having a pension, continue working and paying your Social Security contributions, say for another couple of years, then the pension you would get when you decide to take out the pension would be higher than it would actually have been before.
Will be much higher because the maximum percentage increase is 23% on the weekly pension rate, which is quite a lot.
And that
However, yes.
That applies both to those born before 61 and after 61, right? It doesn't matter.
Yes, it came into effect in 2016, and those who were born during and after 1952 can benefit from such a measure.
So only those who are born after in 62, from 62 onwards.
No,
can
1952 on, no, 1952 onwards.
1952.
Yes, it came into effect in 2016.
Then I'm covered.
Yes.
Can I ask for a clarification, please? So you said I retired at 60. That was in 2000. 2010. But I couldn't carry on working with my job as teacher after 60. So I worked as a part-time self-employed, and I couldn't refuse my pension to add on, to take the pension at 62 or whatever, and add on to these, with these contributions to my pension.
No, in your case,
Was it
no.
possible?
No, in your case, no.
Okay.
Also because it depends on the year of birth, and it came into effect in 2016, only recently.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
Thank you.
unfortunately.
However, we do thank you, Matilda, for your continued contribution to the fund. And
She's a human resource, right?
Yeah.
Pamela, another question. Before we also start looking at some of the questions that are coming in, perhaps. For example, I took a year out to go study abroad, get my master's from abroad, ages ago. Okay, and there weren't any contributions paid during that year. You mentioned something about getting credits for having studied abroad. How would one go about getting those credits then?
Yes, so for furthering one's studies, okay, one would qualify for study credits, which would be eventually added to the aggregate number of contributions upon reaching pension age. The credits, however, depend on the number of years allocated to one's studies. So let's say a level 4, MQF level 4, okay, you get 5 credits for each study year if you were born between 1952 and 1961. Okay, if you were born in and after 1962, is the same. Level 7 masters. So it depends on the MQF level obtained. Another example, level 7 masters. For those born between 1952 and 1961, they get 13 credits for each year. And for those born in and after 1962, they get 26. Study credits are awarded subject to successful graduation. Okay, and one would need to provide to the department a transcript of results. You don't need to wait retirement age to get the study credits uploaded on the Social Security contribution sheet. Yes.
So I can go to the SS, show them my transcript, show them the equivalence. In other words, you need to get the equivalence from the NCFHE to show that it is at level 7 or level 8, whatever it is, since it's foreign. And then
you will be granted with credits.
A year, you'd get 13 credits for that period.
Yes, if they go on ÇEMMA, there's an article about study credits. They can easily key in study credits, and it will come up. The article will come up.
For our participants, Pamela is a regular contributor to the blog post on www.ċemma.gov. So she's plugging in her sales pitch for you all to go visit her blog post. So we'll get the number of visitors up, but that's quite okay, Pamela. Josman, you made it clear that your relationship as within the Commission for the Office of the Commissioner for Revenue is with the employer. What happens when an employer, you were about to mention some sort of agreements, how does one go about it? Say I'm an employer and I have not been paying in what I should have been paying in, and I want to regularize my position. How do I go about doing that?
In fact, half an hour before we started the webinar, I had an employer in front of me. He first went to Business First. Business First is it's part of the land revenue where they treat technical issues with the employer. They want to check about the payments that are still not paid. Maybe there's need to be some adjustments or something like that. And then they end up here. In fact, he told me I was sent from Business First. In that case, I told him the amount due from the years 2016, in his case, from 2016 to 2019. There was an amount, roughly it was around 37,000, including additionals and interests. And
what's the interest rate, Josman?
I think it's 1%.
1% per month?
Yes.
Sorry,
It becomes
Josman.
quite substantial.
Yes.
So there's actually a fee when they fail to pay at the right time.
An employer has to pay the FSS and Social Security contributions a month after. For example, for the month of January, it has to be paid by the end of February. If it's not paid by the end of February and it's paid in March or in April, automatically the system will impose interest.
Okay.
Yes, sir. At the agreement stage, we obviously decide how much is going to pay down payment. Normally it's 20%, but if the amount is high, we can go down to 5%. And the rest is paid by monthly installments. And we can go up to 5 or 6 years. But 6 years, we have to get a permission from the commissioner. So normally up to 4 years, we can give the employer that amount of time.
But obviously, if you pay over 4 years instead of over 2 years, the penalty you pay is higher because of the interest. Right?
I have to mention about the penalty. When we do an agreement, there are two types of agreements. There is the cash agreement, meaning that you pay the whole sum at one time. And there's another agreement with the down payment and monthly installments. When an agreement is concluded with a cash payment, one payment, we give a deduction of 70% on the additionals.
Okay.
So the employer pays
an
only
incentive
30%. Okay.
So there is an incentive.
When we conclude an agreement with the down payment and monthly installments, we give a deduction of 60% on the additionals.
Okay. So there is an incentive for one to shorten the period and also.
Yes.
And
once the agreement is signed and concluded, the interest stop.
Okay. So it doesn't carry on. Okay.
No.
So there is scope to do that.
Yes.
Josman, besides obviously running the risk of ending up in court, would there be any other sanctions that the employer can face? For example, I know that if you are not, for example, regularized vis-a-vis VAT, you are technically prohibited from tendering for any government tender. Are there any other sanctions?
In my case, in our case, our section, the last stage is court. There are other procedures further than that, but it's not in our capacity. higher employees with higher grades, they have other procedures. But in my case and my colleagues, the court is the last.
Well, I believe that once a court case is instituted by government, then immediately certain sanctions come into place. For example, even in terms of eligibility for EU-funded programs sometimes.
Yes,
so
yes,
there are also
in fact,
things that are
even for a simple tender, the employer
Exactly.
has to be up to date.
Mhm.
And sometimes they come here and they panic and they say they want to pay what they have to pay because they have to apply for a tender or something like that. So the employer has to be up to date. And I have to mention one thing also. When we conclude an agreement with the employer, as for example, from, like I had before, from 2016 to 2019, the current year, 2020, has to be up to date.
Mm.
Because unfortunately, some years ago, we used to do agreement that they don't pay the whole year. They pay nothing, they come here, do an agreement. The next year comes, they do the same. So now we stopped that procedure, and now to do an agreement, the current year, in fact, it's one of the conditions listed in the agreement, has to be up to date. If it's not up to date, we cannot do an agreement.
Okay. Okay.
May I ask a question to Jasmine?
Sure.
Okay. Do proceedings at court take long?
Take long. In what sense? You mean the final decision of the magistrate?
Yes. If proceedings take long to conclude.
Well,
because at the end of the day, they affect our pensioners. Then you know what I mean. Okay, we would revise the pension rate, but I wanted to ask if they take long or no.
As I said before, the most important thing as regards to pension is that the employee has the FS3. If the employer doesn't pay, it won't affect him.
I know. Exactly, I know.
This is the procedures in court, unfortunately. Right now, because of the situation of COVID, we haven't had the sitting for months. We're going to start again, hopefully, in January.
Because at times we do encounter pensioners who do not have FS3s at hand, and we ask them to go to IRD, in fact.
Yes. In fact, some employers, unfortunately, have the mentality that when they send in the FS7 and FS3s, they have to pay immediately. I had a small meeting yesterday with the head of section of customer care. He had an employer. He had that thought that if he sends in the documents, he's obliged to pay immediately, and it's not true. In fact, he explained to him that you still have to send in the documents. When they are finalized, and then you can do an agreement. You don't have to pay the whole sum, just at one lump sum. So there are employers, it's misinformation. Some employers have that, it's misinformation. There should be...
Pamela, you mentioned earlier on during the presentation, part-timers and contribution from part-time work. Yes. Right? So if I remember correctly, the first point is how many hours they're working. So if they're working less than 8 hours,
yes,
and earning less than 910 euros in a year, they are not. They need not pay social security.
Yes, if they work less than 8 hours. And their earnings do not exceed 110, exactly. Okay. I agree.
So the first thing is, if you are working part-time but more than 8 hours a week, then social security contributions have to be paid.
If yes, less than basically they would earn more than 110.
If they're working less than 8 hours, but earning more than 910 per year,
Yes.
then they need to pay the Social Security themselves
Yes.
as
Yes.
self-occupied.
Exactly.
How do they go about doing that? So they have to pay it every month, every quarter. How does it? Is there an option for the employer to still pay that
No,
contribution?
it's usually them who pay at the Inland Revenue Department in April, August, and December.
So every
4 months.
Quarter.
every 4
Exactly.
months.
Every 4
And they
months.
actually,
August, and December.
and can this be paid online? I mean, there are so many online services now. Is this something that can be done online as well, Josma? Does that
Just
work?
Yes.
there is an online getaway, right?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
As from 1998, I think it was 1998, the Inland Revenue Department was responsible of collecting Social Security contributions.
Mhm.
The year was 1998, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So, and
But
this can, I presume you need to have any ID and all this, right? To be able to use the service.
There are some payments, you don't need
You don't
any
need to.
ID. I'm
And
not
I
sure.
want, I wish.
I'm not sure about Social Security contributions.
Mhm.
But
Okay, because obviously he would still need to get something from the employer to show how much they've earned. Just the same, no?
I didn't understand.
If you have this a part-time working
Mhm.
worker working less than 8 hours per month, but
Mhm.
earning
Week.
more,
Week.
they would
Mhm.
still need to get some payment, some pay slip or other to show and to substantiate how much they are earning and therefore the level
But
of their contribution.
Pamela, correct me if I'm wrong, but if he is employed, isn't
Yes.
the employer responsible to deduct the Social Security contribution?
Yes. But if they earn then more than 910, they can choose to pay the social the self-employee one.
All right.
Okay. So then it becomes a question of which is the better option, so to speak.
The important thing to note is that when you pay 10%, it will affect the contributions paid at the end of the year. Okay, and then any contribution average from 15 to, as I said beforehand, 49.99 will affect, for example, the 2/3 pension.
Okay.
If I pay the full Social Security contribution rate, I get 52 at the end of the year. If no, I get 34, 40, less than 52. And another thing that I wanted to highlight is that when they pay by retrospective, you know that if you have gaps, you can pay by retrospective and you can apply at 59 years of age. Okay,
And
usually
that can only happen between 59 and 65. You can't do it before.
Yes.
Right.
And usually they pay at multiples. Okay, but the receipt is not enough. So they get the blue receipts from the Inland Revenue Department and we upload the contributions as such. Yes.
So let's see what questions we've had coming in. Jasmine, are there any questions that are of a general nature that perhaps we can put to the panel?
Yes, in fact, there's a question which is about the about students. We mentioned something about the study credits, but there's a specific question about someone who was doing part-time work, obviously paying an eye for that, but also studying at the same time. In that case, which credits are recorded? The ones that are obviously through his part-time employment or the study credits?
So, good question, because I did the same practically. I studied and I worked on a part-time basis. Credits are not creditable if the study period indicates contributions paid from employment, but they fill in the gaps. Okay, so the credits are not creditable if the period indicates contributions from employment. But if there are the gaps, we would upload the contribution sheet with the study credits. Yes.
Okay. So the part-time Social Security contributions would be the ones that are applicable. But if at any point in his employment history there is a gap, then the study credits can be used to plug that gap.
Exactly.
Not necessarily in the year that they were studying. This is what we're saying.
No, in the year that in the study period.
During the study period. So
yes.
Just the
during
same.
That study period.
So basically, if he worked throughout that study period on a part-time basis,
full-time and paid full contributions, okay. In that case, we won't add study credits.
But
So
if they were not
in the case that, for example, this particular person, for example, they had the study month and they stopped working for that month, and there is no social contribution being paid, the study credit will make up for it.
Yeah. Okay.
On the contrary, something came to mind. Child credits for child rearing, right? They can be uploaded up to 6 years of age. So imagine I had a kid, I resumed work, and then when he was 3, okay, school age, I terminated employment for about 2 years. We fill those gaps up to 6 years of age.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else, Jasmine?
Yes, there's another question. Am I entitled to a pension after having paid national insurance for 40 years if I decide to stop working before pensionable age?
That's frequently asked. A lot of times.
That, in fact, from the list of
almost
questions,
daily.
From the list of questions, it stuck out. So I think it's an important question to answer here.
To answer, yes. No, one can only have a pension at 61 years of age, having enough contributions. To give you an example, I was born in 1959, so okay, and I wish to retire at 61. So to benefit from this early opt-out, you need to have 35 years of contributions paid. So you can do 35 times 52, right? But if I was born in 1959, I'm tired, I want to terminate employment, and I terminate employment at 58 years of age, you cannot get a pension at 58 years of age, but you have to wait until you are 61 years of age.
So basically, that means that I can stop working at 58, not get a pension, not pay Social Security contributions,
and they wait up to 61
and then
years of age.
at 61, I get the pension.
But there's a but. It will affect the contribution average, because let's say you've stopped at 58 years of age. There is no NI paid from 58 up to 61. So it will affect your contribution average, and the contribution any deficiency in the contribution average will affect your pension.
Your
pension rate. Yes.
Sorry, Matilda.
If I retire at 58, as we're saying, and then get the pension at 61. In the meantime, instead of my full-time employment, I do part-time work and I pay Social Security contributions. Will that affect my pension then?
If there are 52 contributions or 53, depending on the number of Mondays paid a year, no.
Okay. You still have to pay the full.
Yes, obviously, if you earned less, we won't choose those years for the pensionable income.
But it doesn't make sense for the person who is retiring, in the sense that if you retire at 58 and then keep on contributing to the Social Security up till 61.
Because of a part-time work, right?
If you were still doing full-time work up till 61, you will still be paying the contributions. So if you retire at 58, you still have to contribute fully until...
No, wait. If you can only pay contributions if you are in insurable employment. So if you terminate work, okay,
And
you are
go
not liable to
part-time.
pay contributions, and you cannot even benefit from the retrospective, because to benefit from the retrospective, one needs to be in employment.
Okay, but if you do part-time,
If you do part-time, yes,
you have to do some kind of work.
Yes, you can do part-time work. You pay your contributions. Those will be used for the contribution average, but you will earn less than a full-time job. So the 3 consecutive years we use in the last, let's say, 12 years won't be the last 3 years, but we will choose other years, other consecutive years.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, for the pensionable income, because as I said, the pension is there are 2 main computations. Okay, the contribution average and the pensionable income. To give you an example, for those born between 1959 and 1961, okay, the best 3 consecutive years in the last 13 years for employees are considered. For self-employed and self-occupied, the best 10 years consecutive in the last 13 are considered. But if you are an employee and you terminated your full-time work, you embarked on a part-time work, and those are not your best 3 years, we will consider the others. Yes.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome.
Any other interesting questions, Jasmine?
Yes, in fact, there is a question about eligibility of for pension for EU citizens vs third world country visitors, residents. So maybe if you have some information about that. On the website, we already have the third world country citizens sheet, but I don't recall any for the other EU members. So maybe there's some information that you can share on this subject.
Particularly, we have the DSS has bilateral agreements with Canada and Australia.
Okay.
And obviously the other EU countries. The rest, no. So let's say
for a new resident who is working
Malta
in Malta,
and is working in Malta, yes. If you will have enough.
They will get the normal pension such as a Maltese resident.
Yes, if they will have enough contributions, yes, minimum of 10 years, they will be able to apply for a pension and get a pension from Malta. Yes. Okay. To give you another example, yes.
There is no difference. What nationality does not make a difference if you are an EU national in terms of how you would qualify for a pension from the government of Malta.
Exactly.
If you pay your social contributions and meet the criteria, then you can apply for a pension.
And the situation is different than for third world country residents outside of Europe. They would, how would that work?
I didn't understand the question, sorry.
For other people outside of the EU.
Country nationals.
Exactly.
And they are paying contributions here in Malta?
Yes.
Yes, it's the same. The important thing is that they have the minimum required, okay?
Which is 10 years, right?
10 years, yes. But it will differ for people born on or after 1962, it's 12 years. So it will differ just a little bit. But if they pay contributions here in Malta, they will be eligible for a pension from Malta. Another thing that I wanted to add is that if, let's say, I'm Italian, I've paid contributions here in Malta, and I do not have enough contributions to be eligible for a pension, okay, we ask for contributions paid in Italy.
Okay.
And they will be summed up.
Okay.
Okay. It's quite complicated, but pensions.
Pamela, one of your slides covered Maltese employed abroad, working with UN, for example, and so on and so forth. That does not exempt you from not paying social security contributions, but you can opt to pay social security contributions
at class 1,
at class 2, at a different rate.
Yes.
Okay.
Class 1, yes.
So basically that is the situation. You may opt not to pay them, correct?
Yes.
Or if you need to pay them to make up for the average, then you can pay them at the rate we had specified earlier.
Yes, and they submit just the contract, and we send the bill, which is payable in April, August, and December, and it's payable at IRD. They can do it online as well.
No, but if somebody had worked years ago for a period of time with the UN, for example,
Okay.
how can they regularize that position? Would they pay retrospectively at that rate, or else?
Again, I'm not into it, but if I'm not mistaken, they can apply to pay backdated contributions at the applicable current rate.
At the
But I will check
applicable
about
current
it.
rate.
But if I'm not mistaken, yes, they can apply, but at the applicable current rate.
Okay, and this is, so they still would need to do that when they are when they reach 59.
No, no.
Okay.
The retrospective one is at 59 years of age to fill in the gaps up to a maximum of 5 years. But if you've paid abroad and you wish to cover that period, if I'm not mistaken, they can do it at the applicable current rate.
Okay, at any point in time.
At any point in time, yes.
They don't have to wait to it. Okay, so I think that answers. Anything else, Jasmine?
Oh yes, there are a lot of questions.
Okay,
so,
let's see what else we have.
How do we have time for one more?
Yes, we have some more.
Am I entitled to a pension? No, well, that one I already answered, sorry. How does the widow pension affect the retirement pension?
Okay. How does the widow's pension affect the retirement pension? Okay, so there are a lot of things to speak about. First and foremost, when a person becomes a widow or a widower prior retirement age, before retirement age, he's entitled to credits unless he remarries. Okay, so that's where I mentioned with the widow's credits. Okay, so imagine I'm on a widow's pension and I retire. Apart from having the widow's credits updated on my ledger sheet, on the Social Security contribution sheet, apart from that, when the Department of Social Security can either then issue a retirement pension or a widow's pension, or you can keep the widow's pension, depending the amount, the rate. So you will be issued with the most beneficial rate. Okay, either or. You can't receive both. If you have a pension in your own name and you become a widow or a widower, okay, you will be entitled to the full husband's retirement pension rate. So let's say I'm getting 150 pension a week in my own name. My husband passes away. I don't get the famous 5/6, but I will be eligible for my husband's pension, and I get that one. That's the other way around, however, from retirement to widows. But the other one, I mean, you're just entitled to widow's credits. And as I said earlier, the deceased is the insured person of the surviving spouse. I hope I answered the question.
Can we add something to this for the benefit of those who are following?
Yeah, sure.
When my first husband passed away, I was still in full employment. I was working, but I received the widow's pension just the same. So that's another benefit.
Exactly, because it is not related to employment. Exactly.
It's not, and it's still there. And if I'm not mistaken, it was up till when your children get to the age of 18, or if they are still at university studying, I think it was up to the age of 22. Am I correct?
Now you get your widow's pension I mean, it doesn't depend on the age of your children, on the kids, unless you
You get the
remarry.
pension, but up to
No, now no.
no, you get it.
No, it's not combined. No, you will get it until you are eligible to apply for a retirement pension in your own name. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So you can work and you can get the widow's pension just the same.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
And pay tax.
And pay tax.
One question that one aspect that I wanted to tackle also was about the people who are self-occupied. If I had to take myself, for example, I have a company, I am an employee of that company, and therefore I am treated as any employee. If you have a self-occupied person, how different is that from being an employee? What are, in terms of you know, let me put it this way. If you are self-employed, a one-person show, I know there are other considerations that one has to take into account, but are there benefits from a social security contributions or benefits point of view to incorporate yourself as a company or to continue working as simply self-occupied? Does it make a difference at the end of the day? Tough question.
No, because practically we just differentiate between self-occupied and self-employed persons, and they just pay class 2 social security contributions. I don't know if Josman can help.
So a self-occupied person, one-man show, as Mario said, he pays social security contributions according to his net profit.
Exactly.
Of the previous year. So we're in 2020. 2019 finished, Mela. This year, the rate of the social security contributions depends on the net profit he declared of last year.
Okay.
So you cannot pay how much you want.
Exactly.
Because some people have that mentality that they pay a higher rate so that they get a higher pension.
It's according to what you would have declared during the previous
year. So
in
2020, when you fill up your income tax return, you declare the net profit of 19. The national insurance contributions for 2020 is based on the net profit declared on 2019.
Okay. So it can be, this brings something else to mind in terms of people who are running a family business, where you can have, for example, the wife working, helping the husband out, but is not paid and doesn't pay social security contributions. She's open to how shall I put it, to a lot of disadvantages should things not go well. Right? Or am I missing something here? Because she would not qualify for certain benefits or for a pension.
If she's not registered.
I'm not paying an I. I'm not paying social security contributions.
She's not registered that she is an employee of her husband. She's not entitled for anything.
Well, she can always sue the husband,
in this case, if she's the employee of her husband, he has to register as an employer.
Exactly.
And register her as an employee.
What I'm bringing out is exactly this, because some may think that it is, as Matilda mentioned, when you're young and you think you're invincible, and when old age is looking well into the future, when you're strong and you think you can take on the whole world, then these things, their importance becomes very little. But then, as you grow older, you start to understand just what the implications might be. And then it might be too late to benefit fully. In other words, if you spend 30 years not paying for social security, and then you start paying towards the end, you're going to have a problem in terms of the amount of benefits that you have. And I think it is important to highlight this fact that, you know, in reality, the payment of Social Security contributions is an investment. It's as if you are investing every week by putting aside some money and putting it into a fund that you will realize when the need arises. And this, I think, is a very important concept for people to understand, because very often Social Security contributions are seen as a tax.
Unfortunately, yes.
Than
Unfortunately, yes.
what they truly are.
It is seen as an expense other than an investment.
Yes, it is seen as an expense rather than as an investment. It is also seen as a tax rather than putting away, you know, taking out an insurance. This is what it is. We used to call it national insurance. Taking out an insurance policy in the event something crops up, or in the event, you know, not in the event, that hopefully when we retire, we can continue to get some income to help us sustain ourselves.
And if we didn't have these contributions, we wouldn't have free education, free health. It would be impossible.
Definitely, I think you know, the slide, the last slide, which Pamela showed, you know, I wasn't aware there were so many benefits that come out of Social Security. Marriage grants, maternity benefits, disability allowances, carers benefits. I mean, if we don't benefit directly from them, then, you know, as Matilda said, you know, somebody, you know, 1 degree of separation is likely to be benefiting from it. So again, one sees the value of this and the importance that we take care that we have all documentation in place. Josman mentioned, you know, as long as we, as employees, have the FS3 in place, then we are in the clear, so to speak. And therefore, we obviously need to take care of these ourselves, because nobody else will do it for us. Once we do that, then we are in good shape. Any final comments? Matilda, would you like to add
Mario,
something
maybe...
to it?
All I can add is to what you have just referred, all the benefits that we can get through our contributions. As I said previously, when you're young, you consider it as a tax, but then when you get older, and again, it could be too late then to add contributions so that you'll get all the benefits, especially a good pension. So all those who are following, they have to keep in mind that these are contributions and they are not taxes. And finally, they will benefit in the end from the contributions that they have put in their kind of piggy bank, sort of, getting a pension.
Pamela?
Okay, practically that they shall never hesitate to ask. If they have, there is the Social Security website, there is ÇEMMA website, there are the email addresses, so they can forward any queries, any questions. In that way, they can clarify, and we will be of help, obviously.
Right. And I'm trying to bring up the different
the numerous benefits.
Last page.
No, the contact details.
The contact details. That's right. Let me Let me try to bring that up rather than the final one.
Can I add one small point, please?
Yes, just one.
In fact, because I've noticed a couple of questions, they were all kind of having certain inquiries about kind of like knowing how many contributions they have in their history, how much is paid, if they have any gaps. So Pam, I know that there is an email address that they can get in touch with to request an assessment. Can you share what that email address is for the
Yes,
benefit of the group?
Yes, this is coming up right now.
I've shared my screen.
Perfect.
It's
You shared your
social.
screen. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
So it's social.security@gov.mt. They can easily send an email there, and they can request a tentative assessment.
What
Yes.
information do they need to provide in the email so they can obviously verify their identity?
No, that's the identity card number as usual, the address, the postal address, and they can submit any queries that they like, that they wish to clarify.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Welcome. They can even obtain the social. They can even ask for, and they will obtain the social security record sheet as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome.
So thank you all. Thank you to the participants for taking the time to attend this webinar. We hope that it was interesting and that it provided you with information and hopefully also gave you indications of how else you can gather more information. So thank you, Josman, thank you, Matilda, thank you, Pamela, and thank you, Jasmine. It's been a pleasure having you, and hopefully we'll have another occasion where we can share some more information about our audiences. And I would like you to keep an eye out for our next webinar later on this month, where we will be presenting the research findings of the 4 survey on household money management. So till then, thank you very much and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.